So if you're experiencing stiff hips, then you may be also experiencing a bunch of other things happening with your body, perhaps back pain, neck pain, shoulder pain, or knee pain. The hips, because they're in the center of your body and they're really one of the biggest joints in the body, they affect everything above and below if they're out of alignment or they're tight or they're not able to activate. In today's video, we're going to go through 4 key practices that you can explore to start to loosen those stiff hips. And you may also find that a lot of other symptoms that you're experiencing around your body of tension, they start to also relieve as the hips can start to move more freely.
In a way, the hips are really wonderful part of the body to explore. If I reflect back, I smashed the hips for many years. First, I smashed it with strength training and all that stuff to get stronger. Then I smashed the hips with getting it flexible again. And both was not really supportive from a hip perspective, especially to loosen the hips up.
Mm.
First, the hip was protecting itself against strength or against load. Then the hip was protecting itself against my madness to get it flexible again. And only the things which we are sharing today brought some lightness into the whole game. So it's more about exploration and not trying to fix something. And this
Yeah.
is maybe opening the space for the things we share today.
It's really a common mistake I find. Like when we're looking at the topic of, hey, my hips are stiff, we'll think about like stretching them in different ways. And while there's nothing wrong with stretching, the idea of stretching is to go a bit further than perhaps what we normally do to open up space. But when we're stretching, we're also in our most vulnerable position. And for a lot of people, it's difficult to even start to get into a position where we can effectively stretch because we're already so tight or disconnected from the area. And then often we put ourselves in a compromised position, and it's not effective because we're just not engaged with the area, or like that mind body connection isn't established, or B, we push it too far, or we push other areas too far because there's a lot of dense tissue around the hips through different layers of, the hip flexors and the psoas and the adductors. They all intersect with the hips to help stabilize and move them. But if you're not very connected in that area, then we can compensate. We can overstrain the lower back, we can compensate at the knees and don't even get into the hips. And so that's what really these practices are about that we'll go into. We're going to give you some practices to then open up your space to play and explore. So rather than to try and fix something, because this is such a mistake that happens at the beginning, like Marcus was saying, where we go in with the assumption that, oh, my hips are stiff, that means that there's something wrong with them, and now I've got to do this thing to make it better. You're already better. And so we're just connecting with where you're at, and there's nothing wrong with that. And then we can build our capacity gradually. And no one else can show you that capacity until you test it and explore it. So as we go into this practice with the 4 movements, we're going to do 3 things. We're going to connect, and this is going to be important to establish feeling and knowing our capacity, knowing where we feel tight, maybe where we feel the areas that may be overly loose as well, because tightness isn't just muscle tension. It can also be areas that aren't fully able to activate. So like your nervous system can't send signals to those areas. So it may feel like loose and floppy, and your body has to hold on tight in an endeavor to try and stabilize it. So we'll connect to be able to see all those things happening. We'll observe the area. So we'll notice things like, oh, when I go into this range, that's the edge. I feel when my body starts to really tense up, and then I might know a more productive space to practice in that's uniquely mine, rather than just like go into this stretch and suffer with a smile and then hurt yourself in the process. And then we'll explore the area. So find the different ways that we can do this movement rather than having a set right and wrong way. So you don't then stay in your head going, am I doing it right? Is this the best way? Am I going to hurt myself? All these sorts of things. Once we start opening up to exploring, you then start to reclaim, okay, well, these are my hips. What do I have the capacity to explore? It may not be a perfect looking stretch. It may not be the best posture, but it may be that what you can do to start to then set you on a pathway to then move forward to moving more freely. The first practice is body patting. So a simple way to do this is we literally pat in the area. So we're patting around the hips. As we're doing this, we're stimulating feedback. We're saying, hey, this is your hips. Can you feel this?
Sometimes things can sound weird when we are talking about it, but this is just how human experience is made of. It's really about like, oh yeah, this is a body and I can feel what's happening, and really being more present with the body. And instead of thinking about it, what's right, what's wrong, instead of trying to get the thing perfect, it's really about feeling what's there, and it's in an invitation to experience and not to fix. And this is maybe the difference when we are talking about practices. We invite you to experience what's there, and now the invitation is to feel the body and experience all the things happening when you pet the body. And you can just make it pretty simple. The only thing you will experience is there are sensations, there are thoughts and emotions and feelings. That's it. Within that, you can just lay back and you know what will happen. Sensations, thoughts, emotions, feelings. That's it. And then you just go through the body and maybe bring more around your hips, because this is what we're talking about. And then we can go from there.
One of the main things we're doing here is getting out of the head, getting out of thinking about what your hips are saying and starting to really connect with them. And patting is a really simple but effective way to do that. We're also then starting the process of stimulating circulation through the hips before we then try and push them further. The next practice is an isometric hip activation. So with this, you can have a wall there beside you to help you stabilize. You can also do this seated if you like as well and progress toward balancing on one leg. Basically what we're doing, an isometric is basically a contraction without movement. So we're going to lift our knee up and then push against it with the opposite hand, and then just breathe as we do this. And so you can explore the level at which you push. So you can start off and you can just push your knee gently against your hand. Notice what's going on there. You can then start to push it a little harder. You may notice, oh, as I push harder, then I also start to tense my jaw up or my neck or other areas. So I'm probably pushing a little bit hard. So we want to start to work on the level of engagement so that you can just connect with your hips and keep the rest of your body relatively relaxed. So then we're working with that area more specifically rather than like just becoming overly tense overall.
In a way, we are just using counter tension, like you push your right finger into your left hand. And and we are using the intelligence of the body. If the body has something he can orient itself, doesn't matter if this is the feet on the ground or the hand against the wall or the hand against the knee, the body will orient itself around this pressure and then start to respond. And this is what we are doing. This is creating safety, this is creating a feeling of control and also a feeling of stability. With that, you can just be there and the body will do the rest. That's the wonderful thing. You just open the space, you're using this counter tension, and just observe, and the body will do the work for you. You just have to be there.
Mm.
And within that, you can just variate using different intensities, using different angles. And this is a wonderful way just to observe this really wonderful vessel, how it's adapting in every second of your life. And
Mm.
now we are using the hips as a mirror.
We're using an isometric contraction here because it's a really safe way to connect with your body. And it's also simple to be able to generate tension in the body and start to activate the hips, because a lot of the challenges with tightness of the hips isn't always an inability to open them, it's an inability to activate them and to switch them on. Let's say you've been sitting for a long time, you're not really activating your hips very much. So what we don't use, we lose. And so that area, those neurological connections between your hips and your brain can start to atrophy. So when we start to stimulate it with an isometric contraction, we're starting to strengthen those connections to begin, activate the area so then we can use them more effectively. And over time, as you can contract harder, then you can use more muscles. Then the muscles that you have don't have to work as hard. So it's sort of like a case of many hands make light work. This is a really great place to start your explorations. Once you've explored that, another really wonderful playground or a sandpit to explore the hips is in the straddle position. So you can start this seated, and what we're starting to do is connect with the inner thighs, so all of the adductors, also through the outer parts of the hips and the glutes, and how that all connects with the spine as we start to bend forward and move the hips from side to side. By starting in the chair, you start to be able to like really relax into the hips, because often if we're not able to relax into the hips, then other areas of the body start to tense up, particularly through your back and your legs, which can obstruct your ability to even be able to connect with your hips and to move from your hips.
It's really a light and wonderful way to explore movement through the hip and explore movement in a way most people are not used to experience. Like
Mm.
if you use a straddle, this is not a position many adults use anymore. And then just going into this position and feeling the body can be humbling experience by itself. And then just do this in a seated position on a chair is opening up some new space to experience new things. And when we put in another word for flexibility and we bring it instead of fluidity, then we open up a whole new way for exploration, because everything which is able to move fluid is also flexible. And
Mm.
then just using this position and start to move gently. You can have more or less pressure on the ground and just explore where it's fluid, where it's really feeling like the body is having fun doing it, and not trying to use the hammer and like, oh, I have to fix this because I'm really stiff. No, just feel and play where it's easy and fluid to move around.
A couple of things that can be helpful as you're doing this is just notice the quality of your breath. If your breath is tense, then your body's likely to become rigid. And so just go into the ranges where your breath can keep flowing and then just build on this over time. This is a really good place to start rather than forcing yourself into the deepest possible position and then everything tenses up. Have fun with it and enjoy that process. Be playful with it is a really useful way to start to encourage more fluid motion through the hips. So the last position is the lunge position. This can be explored in so many wonderful ways. Again, you can use support by placing objects beside you, placing a wall beside you. We're just essentially going into a split position. As we do this, we get an opportunity to not only just open up through the hips and all of the tissue that connects to them at the front and the back and the inside and the outside, but then also the legs and the feet as well, and how we connect with the ground. If we're not intentional about it, you don't have to get into these positions in daily life. And this is often why we get so tense and tight, is because we're moving in this little box of just like essential daily movement. So what we're doing is encouraging finding your start point and then gradually opening up a space beyond what you would normally explore. And that's how we really loosen things up, is by giving you a bigger space to move in.
And if you're into strength training or stretching already, this is exactly where Benny and I coming from. The invitation is just to explore your body from a different point of perspective. It's not about getting more, it's about what's there and work with that. And
Mm.
this can change everything, how your body is responding. And also the lunge position can be really, really intense. It depends on in which position you find yourself. Phew, yeah, but you will find some strong sensation when you really push it to the limit. So just be there, watch your breath, explore what's easy and fluid. So you and your system, your nervous system has time to adapt. Otherwise, there will be a protective mechanism happen. And this is maybe what's already there. So just be gentle with yourself and your body.
As you're exploring, of course, we're exploring the position on both sides, so you can start to move from left leg forward, right leg back, and then right leg forward, left leg back. And a useful visualization with this is to just imagine that your hips are like a ball, and then start to explore what are the different directions that that ball can move and turn. As you start to then over time deepen the stance, that's it's turning into a front split. And so this is a playful way to start to move toward that, to stretch and to strengthen the area. And you'll find that applies to so many different things, whether you just like to walk and hike or run or rock climb and or do martial arts and all of these things. It's got a lot of different applications. What I would suggest with this, to build a little practice, you can do this as a cycle of starting with a round of body padding that can go through your whole body or just the hips in general, as a way to prepare and connect and warm up and promote circulation as you go into it. Just set yourself a timer for 3 to 5 minutes to start with the body padding, and then going into the isometric hip activation and taking a few breaths, 3 to 5 breaths as you go onto the right leg, and then 3 to 5 breaths as you go onto the left leg, and then just move back and forth at your choosing for about a 5 minute period, and then move into the seated straddle, explore that for about 5 minutes, and then the lunge position, taking a few breaths in one lunge, and then taking a few breaths on the other lunge for also a period of 5 minutes. So you can do that in about 15 to 20 minutes. And it's a really effective way. If you were to continue that probably every second day or at least 3 times a week for the next month, you will likely have a new set of hips that you will be moving in. And I'd love to hear how you go with that if you do choose to explore. And if you would like further guidance on how to work with your unique body, because that's a big part of practice, is how do I connect and work with the vessel that I inhabit, and how do I build my connection with it, build my relationship with it, and long-term practice. And that's really why we're here and why we put together Movement Plus as well, to support you in that process of connecting with your body and improving the freedom in which you can move through life.
And as Benny mentioned, the individualization process can be very, very helpful and change a lot of things because everyone is unique. Every human being walking on this planet is really individual. And just to nail it down for you can make a big difference. So just explore, and when you feel right about it, just connect, reach out, and then we will be there.
Well, happy hip opening. See you again.